Hello and welcome to another episode of Reading Together from Sea Harp Press. I'm Eugene Luning, co-founder of Sea Harp, and I'm delighted as always to be continuing our journey through C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters. I don't know about you, but just the rhythm of slowing down, reading together, and pondering before the Lord all the amazing things that Lewis offers us in this book, this has been such a gift to me. So we are making our way through. Today we're going to be in letter number 26. My dear Wormwood, yes, courtship is the time for sowing those seeds which will grow up 10 years later into domestic hatred. The enchantment of unsatisfied desire produces results which the humans can be made to mistake for the results of charity. Avail yourself of the ambiguity in the word love. Let them think they have solved by love problems they have in fact only waived or postponed until under the influence of the enchantment. While it lasts, you have your chance to foment the problems in secret and render them chronic. The grand problem is that of unselfishness. Note, once again, the admirable work of our philological arm in substituting the negative unselfishness for the enemy's positive charity. And that would be, again, the enemy meaning God in the context of this book. Thanks to this, you can, from the very outset, teach a man to surrender benefits, not that others may be happy in having them, but that he may be unselfish in foregoing them. That is a great point gained. Another great help, where the parties concerned are male and female, is the divergence of view about unselfishness, which we have built up between the sexes. A woman means unselfishness, chiefly taking trouble for others. A man means not giving trouble to others. I'm going to read that again. A woman means by unselfishness, chiefly taking trouble for others. A man means not giving trouble to others. Interesting delineation. As a result, a woman who is quite far gone in the enemy, God's, service will make a nuisance of herself on a larger scale than any man except those whom our Father, meaning Satan, has dominated completely. And conversely, a man will live long in the enemy, God's camp, before he undertakes as much spontaneous work to please others as a quite ordinary woman may do every day. Thus, while the woman thinks of doing good offices and the man of respecting other people's rights, each sex, without any obvious unreason, can and does regard the other as radically selfish. Now, I gave you 2 paragraphs of the opening of this letter, and I want to back up a little bit. Where did we begin? Remember, in previous chapters, we've looked at this idea that Wormwood's patient, this young man that he's been trying to tempt away from Jesus, he has begun to court, to date, a young woman who is also a believer. But it's an interesting observation right off the bat that Screwtape, Lewis, has given us, that the place of courtship, even in the early days of falling in love, being in love, getting to know someone, are really the time to plant the seeds of what will later become domestic hatred. The right now is actually having repercussions down the road. Then in that second paragraph, Lewis, in the lips of Screwtape, has given us part of the reason why. Oftentimes, and I don't think this has changed really that much at all in the last 80 years since this book was written, oftentimes men and women do have a different perspective on unselfishness, or frankly, many of the virtues that are positive within the way of Jesus. The way he defined it, and I went back and I doubled through it so you could hear it again, is that unselfishness for a woman can often mean that they are taking on the cares of others, that they are actively taking something from someone else in an unselfish way to free them. But I don't think Lewis is wrong that oftentimes us men, sometimes as thick-headed as we can be, we view it exactly the opposite way. It's essentially not imposing ourselves upon others, sort of in a passive way saying, well, it's unselfish if I don't insert myself too much into this situation. So one can seem very active and one's very passive. And yet, and this is an important point, if we are not cognizant of the difference in a relationship, of the way that we both give and receive, say, unselfishness or active love, well, guess what? We can either miss each other or deeply frustrate each other. I can be doing things or not doing things in such a way that I think I'm going to bless my sweet Jenny, and she might be going about her day doing something that I might think, well, why is she up in my business? Friends, the way that we love each other should not get in the way of our love of each other. So as we continue to get down into the weeds of maybe some of these differences of gender, even with things like unselfishness, I would just challenge, whether you're a man or a woman, how do you go about caring for the people in your life? If you're married, how do you serve that person? Is it in the way that's natural for you, or is it in a way that actually does bless them? Interesting thoughts. I'll keep reading. On top of these confusions, you can now introduce a few more. The erotic enchantment produces a mutual complacence in which each is really pleased to give in to the wishes of the other. They also know that the enemy demands, God demands, of them a degree of charity which, if attained, would result in similar actions. You must make them establish as a law for their whole married life that degree of mutual self-sacrifice which is at present sprouting naturally out of the enchantment, but which, when the enchantment dies away, they will not have charity enough to enable them to perform. They will not see the trap, since they are under the double blindness of mistaking sexual excitement for charity and of thinking that the excitement will last. And I mentioned this in one of our last chapters. I want to remind you that when Lewis uses the word erotic, it doesn't mean sort of like highly sexualized. It means the word eros, like that attractive form of love between the genders that we learn in the Greek. So that's what he means by erotic enchantment. And when he talks about mistaking sexual excitement, this is sort of an older usage of this word. It doesn't mean literally sexual intercourse. It means sexual excitement, like an interest and passion and excitement between the sexes. So I don't want you to think that Lewis is being extra racy here. But the point he's making, and I want to lay this on the table before us, is that yes, in the early days of love, I remember so well all of the emotion and excitement of when Jenny and I first met 21 years ago. When you first met, yes, you are willing to absolutely lay down and die for this person. You will do anything they want. Oh, you want to go to dinner there? I'd love to go to dinner there. You want to go do this? Let's do this. Well, yes, over time, when normalcy sets in, well, you're a little bit less inclined to give in, which can be quite frustrating to the other person. But I remember when Jenny and I were dating and getting engaged. I want to throw a little shout out here to Bob and Wendy Ludwig, our dear, dear friends who were counselors to us and helped us kind of make that move from engagement into married life. Well, they told us a story from when they first got engaged, and that probably now was something like 45 or almost 50 years ago. They were going to church one Sunday, and a wonderful older couple, probably in their 80s, walked up to them, saw clearly that they were engaged, deeply in love, and kind of grabbed them by the shoulders and said, "Bob and Wendy, let's give you some advice." They took Bob by the shoulders and said, "Bob, give 100% to Wendy. Expect 50%. Wendy, give Bob 100%. Expect 50." And Bob and Wendy shared that with us because in their perspective, over all their married years of life, so often it was expectation that got in the way of mutuality and enjoyment of each other. Well, Jenny and I have now been privileged ourselves to do some counseling with married couples, engaged couples, and I've tweaked it a little bit. I now say to folks, give 100%, expect nothing. Don't come home expecting that 3-course dinner on the table. Don't come home expecting, well, of course they cleaned the house. I've been out all day. If we learn to be surprised by the service we offer each other, If there's no expectations of practically anything with each other, then everything comes across as an act of love. And if we do it one day at a time, we can fall asleep each night actually thinking, man, I did give myself to this person, and I didn't really expect anything. And I'm so blessed that so much was given. So thank you to Bob and Wendy for offering something that was given to them a long time ago, and now I offer it to you with just a tweak. And now let's get back to where we were. When once a sort of official, legal, or nominal unselfishness has been established as a rule for the keeping of which their emotional resources have died away and their spiritual resources have not yet grown, the most delightful results follow. In discussing any joint action, it becomes obligatory that A should argue in favor of B's supposed wishes and against his own, while B does the opposite. It is often impossible to find out either party's real wishes. With luck, they end by doing something that neither wants, while each feels a glow of self-righteousness and harbors a secret claim to preferential treatment for the unselfishness shown and a secret grudge against the other for the ease with which the sacrifice has been accepted. Later on, you can venture on what may be called the generous conflict illusion. This game is best played with more than 2 players, in a family with grown-up children, for example. Something quite trivial, like having tea in the garden, is proposed. One member takes care to make it quite clear, though not in so many words, that he would rather not, but is, of course, prepared to do so out of unselfishness. The others instantly withdraw their proposal, ostensibly through their unselfishness, but really because they don't want to be used as a sort of lay figure on which the first speaker practices petty altruisms. But he is not going to be done out of his debauch of unselfishness either. He insists on doing what the others want. They insist on doing what he wants. Passions are roused. Soon someone is saying, "Very well then, I won't have any tea at all." And a real quarrel ensues with bitter resentment on both sides. You see how it is done? If each side had been frankly contending for its own real wish, they would all have kept within the bounds of reason and courtesy. But just because the contention is reversed and each side is fighting the other's battle, all the bitterness which really flows from thwarted self-righteousness and obstinacy and the accumulated grudges of the last 10 years is concealed from them by the nominal or unofficial unselfishness of what they are doing, or at least held to be excused by it. Each side is, indeed, quite alive to the cheap quality of the adversary's unselfishness and of the false position into which he is trying to force them. But each manages to feel blameless and ill-used itself with no more dishonesty than comes natural to a human. Isn't that a situation we can picture quite easily? It's the way that we sometimes do conversation and what's sort of harbored in the back of our mind, what we really want, what we're afraid or ashamed to actually admit. And so we harbor it back here while we try to jump ahead and do what the other person thinks they might want, even though we don't really know what they want. Friends, why do we do this? Because sometimes it is awkward to speak the truth, to speak after our desire, to say, well, here's what I would like to do. What would you like to do? And then let's figure out together what we shall do. Friends, when we look at the life of Jesus, we see someone who is actually unselfishness incarnate. We've talked about this before, but as he transits through the course of a single day, he will do 10 things that probably he doesn't particularly feel in his flesh like doing, and yet by his obedience to the Father, he's delighted to do for the sake of love. But what I love about Jesus is he's open-hearted. He's very clear about what he's doing and what he's about. So my challenge to you, whether you're on your own and just in relationship with lots of friends, or perhaps you're dating someone and getting into the rhythms of what it means to love them, or you're married, Or maybe you've been married a very long time, and maybe right now it doesn't feel so happy or easy. My challenge to you on this day is to be open-hearted and communicative. Sit down with the people in your life or the person in your life and talk about it. A really dangerous thing I've heard proposed before is to sit down with your significant other and just simply say, how do you feel like I'm doing in communicating with you? And then don't defend yourself. Let them say what it's like. Let them talk about some of these unspoken, acted upon ways of life that sometimes get in the way of really enjoying each other. And then be honest with them about perhaps how they're doing and speak the truth in love. Last paragraph. A sensible human once said, if people knew how much ill-feeling unselfishness occasions, it would not be so often recommended from the pulpit. And again, she's the sort of woman who lives for others. You can always tell the others by their hunted expression. All this can be begun even in the period of courtship. A little real selfishness on your patient's part is often of less value in the long run for securing his soul than the first beginnings of that elaborate and self-conscious unselfishness, which may one day blossom into the sort of thing I have described. Some degree of mutual falseness, some surprise that the girl does not always notice just how unselfish he is being, can be smuggled in already. Cherish these things, and above all, don't let the young fools notice them. If they notice them, they will be on the road to discovering that love is not enough, that charity is needed and not yet achieved, and that no external law can supply its place. I wish Slum Trumpet could do something about undermining that young woman's sense of the ridiculous. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. I often say this to the couples that we get to do premarital counseling with, and sometimes we'll get to counsel with couples after they're newly married. I often remind them, and I want to remind you right now, whether or not you're married, maybe you just aspire to someday be married. Your married relationship is actually one of the finest places to show the world around you that Jesus is in fact alive. If you want to show the fruits of the Spirit, boy, there's no better place than in the way you, as a wife or a husband, give that to your spouse. The way that you are patient, kind, unboasting, not looking for wrongs. The way that you are long-suffering. The way that you look for simple ways to serve in the Spirit of Jesus. That sort of thing preaches every kind of sermon to those who do not know Jesus when they get to see it. So friends, today is the day to live for others, to be communicative about what you actually want to be and to be about. And in the same way that Screwtape is trying to get the patient off course, I'd remind you to abide in Jesus, to enjoy the way of Jesus is the way to stay ever on the course, especially in a married relationship. Well, thank you as always for being with me as we journey together through C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters. I'll remind you, as I always do, this is a HarperCollins hardcover of this title. It's not part of the Sea Harp catalog, but like so many of you, we just love reading together through Lewis. I hope you have a wonderful, blessed rest of your day.